This is about our wonderful beach cottage, Post-Hazel, at Holden Beach, North Carolina. This year, this is 2019, it is 71 years old. Well, not exactly 71, but I'll get around to that. Billy and Charlie Hauser, Chuck's mother and daddy, built the cottage back in 1948. It was a tiny little green shingled place called the Green Goonie. I didn't know it then. Chuck was in college. Billy had retired as the deputy post commander at Fort Bragg, and they decided to live in Fayetteville and have a little beach house. It was not very well developed back then. Holden Beach, there were very few cottages. So few, in fact, that Charlie put up on the beach side a cocktail flag, a green flag with a white glass with a red cherry. And when that was up, that was an invitation to anyone walking by for happy hour. And then in 1954, 6 years later, Hazel arrived. And make that Hurricane Hazel. It was a Category 4 storm that came in and probably made landfall about 20 miles south of Holden Beach, near the North Carolina-South Carolina line. It totally devastated the beach. There were 1 or 2 houses left standing. Nothing was left of the Green Goonie. Nothing. Back then, all you could get was wind insurance. There was no such thing as the flood insurance. And so, of course, it was very easy for the insurance people to say to Billy and Charlie, "We're sorry, this must have been water damage." Until someone found 2 miles inland, across the inland waterway, a framed picture. The glass was cracked, but the wording inside was what saved them. It was when Billy Hauser crossed the equator, and that was a big deal back then. And so it said Colonel John Hauser, had his name. The insurance people paid, and the cottage was rebuilt. It was also renamed, and that's when it became Post-Hazel, a homonym for after Hazel, the hurricane, and Post, the Army Post Hazel. Post was appropriate since just about all the men in Chuck's family, his father, his brother, graduated from West Point. During Chuck's senior year at UNC, when the Korean War was declared, he enlisted. He became an artillery forward observer in Korea, returned home with a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star. And it was after that I met him. It was a true Army family. When Chuck and I first went down, we met in 1955, just after the hurricane. And he took me down that same year. And you could see in the marsh right across the road from the Post-Hazel, stoves and refrigerators, chairs and tables slowly sinking into the marsh, where it took them almost 8 or 9 years to be fully covered up and the beach restored to its natural beauty. We had fun in those early days. There was no telephone, no TV, and in fact, no air conditioning, which wasn't so much fun. And if the no-see-ums came out with a land breeze, you just had to go to bed and pull the covers over your head. If you wanted to call somebody, no such thing as a cell phone, of course. No, but that was science fiction. But if you wanted to call somebody, you had to go down to the pier, to the only telephone on the island, and it was an outdoor phone. After that, the children came. In 1967, my brother, my sister Mary, my brother Bill, we all had boys born in 1967. And that's when my family, the Edwards family, started going the last 2 weeks in June every year. And Mother and Daddy would come down from Springfield, Ohio. Chuck and I came down with our son and daughter, David and Susan, from Rhode Island. My sister Mary came up from Miami, Florida, with her husband, John Crable, and their 3 boys, Bill, Brad, and Andy. Mary and John actually got engaged at the beach cottage several years before. And my brother Bill came down from Cleveland, Ohio, with Carol, his wife, their 3 girls, Eve, Karen, and Leslie, and son Bill. Grandmommy, Chuck's mother, would come from Fayetteville, and we had a full house and lots of fun. Back when Mary and John and Bill and Carol came with all their children, we used to, at our cottage, at any rate, we used to wash everybody off at the faucet, the cold water faucet at the bottom of the stairs. The dog got washed off, and certainly the children did, as they well remember. In those 2 weeks in June, it was his birthday, Grandpa's birthday, on the 21st of June, so we always had a cake and celebrated. And the children had a wonderful time with him. He was a great storyteller. He was a football coach, and his name was Bill Edwards. He's in the Football Hall of Fame, in fact. And of course, we did a lot of shelling. Grandpa was great on telling all the grandchildren that if they found a scallop shell, to save it and give it to the man at the Esso station when their daddy filled the tank up, and he'd give them free gas. We always went crabbing. Uncle Chuck, my husband, was the one who took the kids crabbing. To catch a crab, as Chuck taught them, you tie the chicken neck on a string, you just hold it over the crab hole, wait for that crab to grab hold. These are blue crabs, by the way. And grab them with a net, put them in a bucket, and hope they don't get loose in the kitchen like one did one time, and I was in my bare feet. I remember that well. I would usually boil them, and Chuck's mother, Grandmommy, would teach the children how to pick the crab, and they'd sit up at the counter and eat fresh crab right out of the crab hole that they had caught. We went swimming every day. In the morning, came in for lunch, stayed inside because of the hot noonday sun, and then went back out late afternoon. The children loved to jump the waves. We played lots and lots of games. Scattergories was one of our favorite. And of course, we always played cards, usually hearts. The last memory I have of my dad at the beach is him jumping up from the table and saying, "I shot the moon." One night, little Bill Edwards, who was about 8 at the time, came running up to our cottage. Their cottage was the closest one to us, but it was probably a football field away. And he came running down the beach, running in with his white t-shirt flapping and saying, "Aunt Jane, Uncle Chuck, there's a turtle laying eggs." And we all went out, and it was perfectly magical. A loggerhead turtle, must have been over 400 pounds, had dug a hole with her flippers, and when they start laying a nest of about 100 eggs that look like little soft ping pong balls, when they start this, they go into a trance. And actually, it looks like they're crying, but they're not in pain. They're simply washing the salt water out of their eyes. And we watch this huge, beautiful turtle dropping these eggs, and then they cover them back up with the flippers and go back out to the sea. And years later, Chuck and I would become turtle parents and help birth the babies and get them out. He took a big lantern and got in the ocean because there was no moon that night, and he was the moon, and I shepherded them into the sea. It was quite magical. When we stopped having a lot of family coming down, we had lots of friends that came down, and I can't go without mentioning Nellie, my dear friend. We loved to cook together. Aline and Irwin Smallwood used to always come down every summer. They were regulars. They usually got their own cottage, but they joined us for all the family doings. And Aline always brought tunnel of fudge cake and snickerdoodles, which all my children remember to this day. She was a great cook. Chuck loved Post-Hazel and Holden Beach so much, he wanted his ashes to be scattered there. And David and Susan and Jamie and I went around and scattered his ashes around Post-Hazel. We went across the road, scattered a few in the ash by the crab hole. And then we went down on the beach and scattered them out to sea. So Chuck is still with us today at Post-Hazel. So times at the beach were great, and they're still going on for members of the family. We started with Billy and Charlie, it went to me and Chuck. David and Susan love to go, they continue to go. And now Cam, my only grandchild to this date, is going down with his mother, Susan, and his father, Mike Kellogg. And David is going down with Molly, and there will soon be another little Hauser coming along, who will be going, I hope, to the beach and having great times, memories of their own.